Hello and welcome. This is my HTML crash course. Just to give you a quick introduction, this will require no previous coding, programming knowledge whatsoever. This is just simply you've decided you want to look into web development and this is the first place to go. So this will be geared as if you're a complete beginner who hasn't heard anything about web development other than HTML, which obviously brought you to this course. So there are a few things we need to get started. The first thing we'll need is an internet connection, and the second thing we'll need is a text editor, or more preferably an IDE. So I've just got a simple lightweight one here, Visual Studio Code. So if you just go to Visual Studio Code and download it for your platform, they do it on Windows, Mac and Linux. So just download it, run through the installation. It's very basic. There are two options in the installation. When it says to add to path and things like that, there is an option to add to your file explorer. This would basically mean that you can just open up, like when you right click on a file, you can select open with Visual Studio Code in that. That's just one thing to note. So I've already downloaded and installed it, and I've just made a simple file here on my desktop called HTML. So we've just got that in there. So all you'd have to do when you start up is open file, find where it's located, click on it and select folder, and it'll open up. We currently have nothing. But before we get started, I'm just gonna go through. So things to note: HTML is a hypertext markup language. That's all it stands for. So it has no functionality. It's just the skeleton of a website. So when you open a web page, HTML would just be all of the building blocks that make that. When you go into CSS, that's essentially the skin, and JavaScript would be the muscles, if you want to think of it in biology terms. So CSS makes it look pretty and JavaScript makes it move, so the muscles. But we'll get into them in later courses. The first thing we're going to do is, if you just come into here and type live, you'll already get it. You're going to get this live server extension. This is why I find Visual Studio Code very helpful, amongst other things. So if you just click that and install it, once it's installed, you'll get this little icon down in the right, go live. We'll get to that in a sec, but what it will do is it will open up your default browser, and it will show all the HTML we have wrote. So to get started, we're just going to write index.html. Index is generally used as the root file, as the home page or something, the first file you go to, and the .html just says this is a HTML format. So if we start that, we'll get it up, and because in Visual Studio Code it sees the HTML format, it will know what we're writing, so that's handy for us. So the first thing in HTML is this HTML doctype. We're going to be focusing on HTML5 because that's the modern standard now. No one really uses previous versions. So this just declares that HTML5 is the document type, so it allows the browser to work out what it's doing, and it will be line 1 of any website. Then we have the HTML, which basically says all our HTML stuff is inside these tags. So you have an opening tag and then a closing tag, and the closing tag is defined by this slash here. Now in a HTML document we have two, it'd help if I could spell, we have two important tags and these are separate tags which are contained inside of the HTML. We have the head, which is all the important content that the user doesn't see. And inside the body, we have everything the user does see. So we're going to get started. As the head is everything the user doesn't see, with the exception of this title tag here. So if we just say hello world, this will be the title of this page. And the reason this is the exception to what the user doesn't see is because if we click Control S on that and we go to go live, it'll quickly open up this. We've written hello world, and that is the title of the page. That is the only thing in the head that the user will be able to see, in a sense, but it won't be displayed in anything inside the body, which is here. Everything in the body is below the browser window taskbar. So if we just minimize that, we'll get started on the next items that go into the head. So what we might have is a meta tag. So the meta tag is just like a all the key information to the web page. You don't have to worry about it too much to get started. I mean, having a web page with no metadata whatsoever would work. There is one useful website to get started with your HTML, and that's w3schools.com, and it has a handy reference guide for all the tags that you could possibly use in a HTML document. So don't worry about like memorizing every single last tag we go through in this video. But as I said, a meta tag would be like a description of your website, and then inside there you write a just basic description of the web page. But that's more of an advanced thing, so we won't focus on the meta stuff for the time being. We might get into it later, depending if time allows, or later in the course. So we'll move on to the body. This is everything the user does see. And for now, we'll just quickly list all the main tags that you're gonna see in pretty much every website. So first would be a header. You're probably going to see a nav tag, a main, section, article, sorry about that, article, div, span, p tag, and you're going to see things like h1, and this goes from h1 to h6. And think of it like this: h heading, so it's like a title of the page, and then 1 to 6 is the importance of that heading. So h1 would be your first priority heading, h2 would be like a subheading, and so on down to 6. So let's get started. What's the header tag? The header tag is anything that's sort of at the top here. I mean, essentially, depending on how you wrote it, you could have like a header here if you wanted to, but that's not really the standard structure of a web page. A header is usually at the top, and it will contain like your navigation, menus, or if you got like company logos like this Visual Studio Code here, or the w3schools.com here, and you could think of this top section as the header where it goes to tutorials. So then we got this nav tag, and the nav tag generally means navigation. Now the standard would generally be the nav will be found inside of a header like this. So you open up your header and then you put nav inside. That means the nav is now found inside of the header, and you have your closing tag after what is contained inside. And there's a couple of ways you could do the nav, but the main standard is to use an unordered list, which is the UL tag. There is also an OL tag for an ordered list. The only real difference between them is a default styling that is set to them. This is different from CSS, where you can customize your styles and move things around the page. But HTML will give basic styling properties to certain tags. That's one thing to bear in mind. But they can be overridden with CSS, so it's not overly important. And you'd have a list item inside of your tag. So if we said about, and then we had another list item inside the same unordered list, we can have services, something like that, and then contact. Another additional one to note is this A tag. So if we just click cut that out and we put about in here, an A tag is basically a link tag. So it has an attribute called href, and you just put an equals, so the href is equal to, and then you quote what it's equal to. That's an easy way to think of it, so remember to put in your quotes. And you can say, whenever you're linking to an external website, you want to put in the HTTPS, otherwise it will probably default to thinking it's in the file structure of your website. So this knows now it's external, and we'll just put in the famous Google. And another one, you don't have to put it in, but it's called target. And if I put target underscore blank, it will create a new tab when the link is clicked. If I had nothing, then it would probably link to something within the page. And another way to use the A tag is to put the href equal to, this would basically mean it's just a placeholder, so it doesn't crash your website now, but it doesn't go anywhere either, so it makes it slightly pointless. But we'll just put in about for here, and we'll come to that in a sec. So just remember that about's there, and we'll get to that later. And we'll just type in, oh, sorry, like that, services, just so it makes sense. And then we've got a contact. So now that we've done that, we'll just save that and we'll come back to this. As you can see, we've got an unordered list which just puts bullet points. If we had an ordered list, it would just say 1, 2, 3, so that it's in order. And then if we click about, remember we put in that target blank, so it opens a new tab. And we assigned the href to Google, so it opens a new tab and just puts inside whatever the href was. So we got Google there, and then we got service. If we click that, nothing happens, but you will see services comes into here. That's the traditional way of an anchor tag. anchors an element to that point, or vice versa. And then contact, we didn't put an A tag on this, so it's not underlined, it doesn't go anywhere, it's just a standard list item. And there are other things we could obviously put in the header if we wanted to, but for the purpose of this, we don't have to. The next one is the main. So the main content. But on most websites, you'll see something like this sort of section here. It's not the main content, so we can separate it from what's underneath, which is the main content. So this is just like a hero or a main stage, whatever you want to call it, to grab the user's attention, but it's not necessary to the website. If it was removed, you'd still have all the main content. So we can just use a section tag here if we wanted to with a div. A div is just a block. Just think of it as a wrapper, and any content you want, and it's not really falling under any of the others. You can use a div and it will take up the whole space of its parent container. So if the section took up the whole screen, then the div would ideally follow suit. So we could have a div, and we're just going to follow suit of the Visual Studio Code website. So what you'll see is this. It's an image tag. Now it's slightly different from the rest in a way that you have like a header tag and then you have a closing tag. Well, an image doesn't generally contain anything inside of it. All of its properties are stored within its own attributes, so it becomes a self-closing tag. That's the way to think of it. And its attributes consist mainly of a source and an alt attribute. So the source is where the image is coming from. This can be an external website, or it can be within your own file system. So if it is in our own file system, you'd have something like that, or JPEG, depending on what the format is, and that'd link to something in your own file system. If it was an external image, you'd have like the address of that. So if we just search images, can just click on this, click copy image address, and we'll just paste it in there. It goes a bit long, but we could always put like a code wrapper. I just haven't done that at the moment on my IDE, sorry. And the alt is mainly used for screen readers, so anyone that has visual impairment or such, they'll have a screen reader that reads through the browser. So this is an image of a flower, so we'll just put an image of a flower, and that's essentially it. So if we save that and we come back, there's our image of a flower. So images are just wrapped in the img for image tag, like so. Then outside of this section, we'll go into the main. Again, the main is the main content of the page, so all your important information. Inside the main, we could do like a section to break it up. And in fact, we'll follow the format of the navigation. We're just going to put all our stuff on the same page instead of different pages. I'll just remove that for now. And remember up here we had the anchor tag, and we put a hashtag services. So if we use this ID tag and we type in services here, And then we're just gonna knock up some random stuff inside of here. So services, we're gonna have a H2, so a heading. Oh, so if we had a H1 in here that said hello world page H1, and then in here we're just gonna have hello world H2, just so you can see the difference between H1 and H2 with its standard HTML styling. And then inside that we're also going to have a p tag, a paragraph tag, a basic text. So this is our services section. Oh, I forgot to put the about section. Don't worry, we can just put that down. So it reads top to bottom. So the services will be second to the about in the order. We'll see that later on. And then here we'll have our div H2 contact. We'll just change it to about so it makes sense. So we've got our about section, our services section, and I mean, it would work if we didn't put an ID, but we'll just put contact on here, and come up here, we'll get rid of that. We'll put our trusty anchor tag on there. href equals contact. And then this article tag would be like a standalone content, so we can just whack it in there, and then we could just have like several little sort of, I don't know, H3, just put a comment, some comments text, and that'd be an article. It's standalone content that could just be, if someone was to link to that specific article to their own web page, then it would be understandable. It's standalone sort of content, which is kind of in contrast to a less used aside, which aside is used when the content inside of that would support outside content. Some of these aren't really used that much anymore. And then inside our contact we can use an address. So this will just format like an address, like X street, Y city, and use England. So postcode or zip code if you're watching from the States or something like that. And then outside of our main content, we use this footer tag, which is the opposite of a header. It's everything at the bottom of the page. So all this here, hello from Seattle, and their GitHub stuff, links, and the copyright is all in the footer. So if we just done like a p tag and we done copied 2019. See what that looks like. So if we come to our site now, you can see it's all standard, boring looking HTML, but we have our about, which goes to Google because that's where we've done it, and we've got services. Now you noticed I've clicked these and it doesn't really move. That's because the content is already sort of in vision here. So services section we can already see. However, contact goes right down on the page. So if we click contact, you see it just moves it a bit more into view. But if services was off the page now, then it would scroll down to that. So if we just do that, brings it down to contact. So yeah, it just moves to that anchor point, but if it's already in view, then it's a bit useless. And then of course down here you can see the hello world footer. So if we come over here and more tools, developer tools, not used to Edge, prefer Chrome. We can see our layout done. So it's got the doc type, HTML, and then inside the head it's got the title. There's obviously other content we can put in there, but we won't dive too much into that. That's probably going to need references to go through anyway to remember all of them. And then we got a header, a nav, and it's laid out exactly the same as what we wrote. All of this. Sorry if I go back to there. And there'll be no styles on this because of course we haven't linked a CSS or JavaScript file to it. And yeah, so if we come into header, nav, you can see on the developer page showing you what's what. Oh, we could actually, I'm just going to put a span in here and then I can show you sort of what's that doing on the dev tools to highlight the difference between a div and a span. Yeah, so if we come into the header and nav, and then you can see the UL and then the list item, and then inside there we have our A tag, and it highlights each part as well in the developer, which is nice, so we can see where everything is. We got our H1, then our image, and then if we come down to main, we've got our 3 different sections, section 1, section 2, section 3, and you can see the IDs there as well, with our article as well, so a comment. So there's the article wrapping there, and you can see the div wraps all of it. So the H1, H2 section, and then the div is exactly the same size as the section. You got H1, H2, and then your article, and inside that you got your H3 and your P tag with a span. Now notice the div is essentially a wrapper which fills out its parent element, which would be this section here. They're the same, no change in the highlighted. However, if we come down into article, H3, and then the P, the span only highlights the word some, which is inside the span tag. That's because the span will only fill out the amount of space needed for what is stored inside of it, whereas the div follows the parent. The span follows the child, if that makes sense. So it will just wrap around it. Now, I hope all that was useful. That was basically a quick wrap up of HTML. I think I said before, but there's a nice handy reference page on w3schools.com. It's a very useful website for just looking up quick references on stuff, so you can know sort of which tag to use, when to use it, where it's generally placed, things like that. A nice handy tool is like if you just right click on Chrome and inspect, you'll be able to just look at someone else's website and go, oh yeah, I see what they've done. They've got like their div there and then the div there, and oh yeah, they wrap it through like that, and it'll give you some insight as to how others do it and how they format the structure of different websites, which is very handy. But again, HTML is not too much to fuss about. The main thing you have to remember is to open your tag and everything inside of it goes inside, and then you close your tag. That's one important thing, otherwise you'll get a few issues. Might not generally crash, but it'll wrap things differently. And some attributes, so you got ID. Other attributes in terms of section, that would generally refer to CSS. So you'd have class equals and then whatever the class was. But we'll get into that when we go into our CSS. And I think that about wraps it up. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like if you liked it, leave a comment if you want to interact, and remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified whenever there's a new video. Alright, have a nice day and thanks for watching.